Hello, everyone. Thank you for clicking and joining us. I hope you are doing great. And thank you to Walid, Khalid, and Osama for joining me here today on Skype. Hello,
Most welcome.
Thanks for having us.
how are you doing?
We're doing great.
Really
How are
good.
you?
I'm fine,
We're still
alhamdulillah.
in one piece.
Yeah, it's been a long time, with the Walid. I think we did it twice, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, we've been
I think
online
twice, but
twice.
last time was like before COVID.
Yeah, that's right. But with
Getting
Osama,
started. Yeah,
it's our
I
first
think that
time
was sometime.
Yeah, it's the first time here.
to be here together. So, today we're going to talk about, just like we posted on our pages, English in Iraq difficulties and suggestions. And before we go into details into that subject, we're going to start with you, Walid and Osama, asking you about your teaching experience. You've been teaching English for years, right? And you've
Yeah.
taught different age groups, I think, starting from teenagers, adults, and even old people, right? But I don't
Yes.
think maybe you've taught children before, Walid. Have you ever taught children?
I'm teaching children right now.
Nice. So, like, how old are
Some
they?
privileged ones.
Okay. And what makes children, let's say, different from other age groups you've been teaching?
I think there's this common expression. I have this kind of pressing urge to always
hmm
inject a few expressions when we talk, and it's what makes children tick.
hmm
Is that their perceptibility and their intelligence level and their sponge kind of memory to remember everything. They are kind of absorbent
Mhm.
of the information that is transferred to them
Yes.
and from them,
Yes.
depending, of course, on the conductivity of the context or siyaq. Um, I've been fascinated with the way they learn English and the kind of skills they have. Like, you say something a few weeks down the road, they just throw back something that you said that you almost forgot.
Yeah.
It's
Still fresh
and
memory.
it's quite interesting. And that reminds me of a situation I was in WC some time ago when I was back in US. And I was just about to get out of WC. And there was a little kid who was accompanying his dad, and they were entering. It was in the cinema. It was a WC in cinema in the United States, and he told his dad, "Daddy, I eated all the popcorn."
Okay.
And I was like,
Eat it.
he eated all the popcorn. He was a native speaker of English, and he said that expression. His age was 7 to 8 years old.
Okay.
And it just fascinated me that at this early stage of language learning, whether you are a native speaker or non-native speaker, whether you live in the United States or you don't live in the United States, you can acquire English and speak it like a native speaker. And that what made me shift to teach some kids, actually. And the reason I decided to teach them is because there was some pressure on me by certain families who are kind of acquaintance to me. So I have two, and I've been teaching them, and they are almost native speakers of English. And I'll just give the floor to Osama to chip in and say his
teaching experience.
His experience in this field, and then we can exchange back and forth the discussion.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Walid. I appreciate it. Speaking of kids, I have not very deep experience, but as Mr. Walid mentioned, actually teaching kids, the way they grasp information and they get into the close to native-like experience when speaking, just because they learn so fast. But to be honest, I personally don't really tend into training them English, but it's fun because they learn fast, unlike when you're dealing with older ages. Exactly.
They're not bothered with everyday life problems and these stuff. They don't have a job. They're, all there for you, just like we say. And
exactly.
just like Mr.
I
Walid
wanted to
said.
yeah,
Yes.
I wanted to ask Mr. Walid here when you said almost like native speakers. Do you mean the kids that you are now dealing with, or back in the US?
Yeah.
No, now I have a couple of kids who've
Yeah.
been engaged with online gaming experiences, and
That's
they've
the point.
developed this knack for language by just
Yeah.
socializing with other players from other countries. And
Mhm.
there's this lingua franca that they developed is I don't know, accidentally English
Yeah.
or not
Acquiring that.
accidentally
Yeah.
English, but they used it as a game to deliver and exchange information and build teams.
Mhm.
And actually, it's been thoroughly discussed and addressed in the literature of English research and applied linguistics that
Mhm.
what makes gaming so engaging and so conducive to language learning. And it seems to me, based on the kind of research that I've gone through, is
Yeah.
that English is just a kind of channel to transmit knowledge and different kind of experiences to build constructively something or that you plan to get to, or an objective or a goal.
Mhm.
So constructing that goal requires enough attention to details,
Mhm.
and building backward, as we say, reverse engineering the structure of language. You have to be careful about the kind of wording that you choose, especially if you are building a defense in a castle. And I think Osama knows quite well what I'm talking about right now here,
Mhm.
since he's been engaged with some gaming and has
Yeah.
been doing
Yeah.
some videos based on that. So
Yeah.
incorporating gaming and language learning.
Mhm.
And this comes quite naturally
Mhm.
among early ages,
Yeah.
especially if we consider the fact that there are certain online stimuli
Mhm.
that will enrich their auditory skills.
Mhm.
So the auditory context of their learning is quite rich with vocabulary, with conversation, with building syntactic structure of sentences.
Yeah.
That will ultimately make them produce language that is, let's say, quasi native speakers.
Mhm.
We cannot attribute them to speak like native speakers,
Mhm.
100% like native speakers, because the DNA of native speaker
Of course.
is requiring the fact that there is social context
Mhm.
that is producing language simultaneously.
Mhm.
With the lack of stimuli of context here, the
Mhm.
only reliance that they have is particularly on the online gaming virtual reality.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's
Yes.
not full engagement to get to like native speakers.
Mhm.
That is exactly right.
But don't you think that this is so limited that they improve their English through video games, and when it comes to using the language at the airport, at a restaurant, they feel helpless?
Is this question to me or to Osama?
Yeah, to you. And then we hear some.
Well, I think the safest answer that I can provide here is that it depends. There are so many variables that they go through.
Mhm.
Some of them engage with the real players in their neighborhood.
Mhm.
One of the students that I'm teaching right now actually meets his friends and they play until 4 a.m.
No.
So with this, I know it's intermittent, but with this direct exposure to virtual reality and transferring that into real reality, there is a sense of brotherhood. There's a sense of bondage. There's a sense of
Fun.
living
fun.
the reality of speaking like native speakers. And I think that if we just funnel it down to the basic components, that what do we need as learners to produce language productively and efficiently? We need basic vocabulary, and we need a context to say certain meanings to people. And this exchange of transmitting and coding and decoding messages is going to enable us to generate infinite number of grammatical structures in language. Like I wouldn't consider teaching them passive voice because they are quite efficient in it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider teaching them the present perfect because they have acquired it. So they've overcome the
maybe
they
they don't know it, but they use it.
Yeah. Subconsciously, they can produce it with low latency, as we say, technically speaking, of delay in restructuring the grammatical context, or with low interference of first language.
Great.
Since in Arabic, sometimes the syntactic structures of Arabic might interfere with the formation of the grammatical constituents in English.
Nice.
To certain point, of course.
Great. So if I may modify this question to Osama again, we, just like Waleed said, that we have seen some children, I'm not saying native-like, but they are very good at English when it comes to playing video games. But does it mean that we should let our children play video games, listen to songs, or what other resources we have, and not 100% depend on schools and courses that we offer here in our country? Do you suggest?
Well,
I mean, for children.
For children, I believe that we all should depend on everything we have, because relying only on games will not really get to the academic level. So with the schools and the institutions we have, we can get the academic level of learning so that we can, as Mr. Waleed said, it comes in constructing sentences and the grammar. We cannot get that from games. Games can give us this experience of speaking naturally. But in order to apply linguistically what you are learning, then you need schools and even colleges. And sometimes, like for example, now those kids are learning with Mr. Waleed. They have good English, but I believe they miss that academic part, or when it comes to grammar. So they need to learn those basics. But I believe if someone is only seeking for learning how to speak and just deliver simple ideas, exactly for communication, then what they are learning is fair enough. Yes. And by the way, I personally got into the English when I was young. And one of the reasons was actually because I love video games. So I started to learn so that I can personally understand what I'm playing. And I'm sure if I had online games back then, I wouldn't have learned a lot faster. This is why the kids are learning fast these days.
So, Waleed, what Osama is suggesting, that the current generation is having a privilege, which is technology, which we, and maybe your generation, was missing back then, right?
Well, talking about our generation, I think there is a huge gap in terms of the accessibility to technical and technological devices that will put the gap closer between them and language. In the Iraqi community, or in the whole society, generally speaking, there is tendency to misuse technology when it comes to getting the benefit of learning language, taking care of their time management. Not only do we talk about language learning, but about other aspects of in general. Like one of them I was talking about it recently is that the lack of attention to the elite people when they talk about the significance of language and how you can galvanize yourself you can armor yourself with language and you can get better opportunities. Winding back to the beginning of games, I would say not everybody can get a PS4 to play games, and not everybody can get a 24/7 electricity or power,
just like me,
to be plugged online. Honestly, Now I'm talking to you. We are all on the same boat. Just turning on the generator to talk to you because it's unpredictable when the power is off and on. However, the value of this discussion outweighs whether you are in shadow or in light. But regarding this generation, I would say it's overprivileged when it comes to technology, and it's underprivileged when it comes to time management. they don't have planning.
That's right.
I remember that quote that a stupid person with a plan
Yes.
is better than a smart person without a plan.
Nice.
What you need, ultimately speaking, what you need is to provide yourself with enough access to language, whether that's auditory or that's through reading or through social engagement or through suppressing your hesitation and your lack of confidence in order to overcome just the beginning of your language learning.
Yes.
Language learning is only about the starting point. Once you start fast, it's like a skyrocket.
Yeah.
You just need so much
push.
horsepower in the beginning, and once you are in the orbit, things will become relatively easier to move from one orbit to another.
Nice.
And you get to a point where everything will become horizontal. So your progress is going to be through learning about technology terminology or legal terminology or other terminology in language territory.
Nice.
So you just need to supplement yourself with sufficient vocabulary, the most common ones, the right and authentic kind of training materials. And I'm sorry to dominate this discussion because Sama is just listening there, and you should interrupt me whenever you like.
Okay.
And there is this tendency of this generation to just ask, but do not sustainably continue on their training. They just have very high motivation. They are hyped to learn the language today, and when you check on them next week, they're doing something different.
This is the question. They are always asking us, where should I start off from? What is the best way to improve my English? I want to be a native like. And if you look back, we've spent almost 10 and for some others more than 15 years studying English in school and college, but ended up almost nothing. Almost nothing. And Osama mentioned that we should have a combination of everything we have around us, starting from music to movies and video games. But I mean, what about these 10 to 12, 15 years of studying English? Is it a waste of time, you think, Osama?
No, of course not. It's not a waste of time. A lot of people think that it's teachers' fault or the system. And to be honest, I don't blame the system, because imagine a class in a school that has, let's say, 40 students, and you have only 45 minutes to do that. You cannot make them a practice. And the teachers are limited into the materials that they have. So they have to teach it, and they have exams and things to follow. So I believe it would be a lot better if they can create a class just for practicing, just for speaking. That will help. And speaking of the question you mentioned at the very beginning of where shall I start from, we get this question a lot. And to be honest, I believe people who ask this question are not seriously interested to learn, because as Mr. Walid said, once you start, try to learn English, that's it. You'll be on the track, on the orbit, and you'll start learning immediately. It's just a matter of consistency and following the plan you have, and that's all. Especially these days, we have a lot of, let's say, sources everywhere that can actually teach us English. Back then, we had a lot lower sources than now, but because we wanted to learn, and we learned. So people who are not really seriously interested to learn English, they ask and fire these questions without even trying to start learning.
That's right.
I think the whole discussion about the education system and whether language learning is not producing a speaking generation is very valid to some extent to talk about. Once we weigh the standards of teaching, there are we can come down to three major elements: the reliability, the validity, and the practicality of the lessons that are provided to a group that is not optimal to language learning. So the ideal group is to have around 12 students in the classroom, and now this is outnumbered by 50 or 60 people in the classroom. And I heard from some teachers, it gets to 100 students in the classroom with 45 minutes of instruction. Now, when we're not talking about interaction, we are talking about instructive language model, where the source of knowledge speaks for 45 minutes, if not less, and the rest is going to be rotational on students to beat them or to ask them why they haven't finished their homework. So if we divide, let's say, if we divide 50 by 45 minutes, every student will get less than a minute to produce language. And that is, if we say 3 classes per week, that's 3 minutes of language production every week, which is 12 minutes per month, which is 30 minutes per semester. Now, 30 minutes of language production is, I would say, excessively not enough to produce a generation that speaks English. But we have to go back to the bottom of the issue, because we are in a bottleneck right now when it comes to asking, why is this generation, after 12 consecutive years of education and direct instruction in language, is not producing language? Well, first of all, nobody just got to me and said, well, let me interview you for 5 minutes to see if you're speaking English. Everybody was checking if I can add the ed at the end correctly to the irregular verbs.
That's right.
Everybody was checking if I can read a passage that was not given to me before in the high school, so I can give answers to a passage that does not have validity or reliability in the lesson, because students get given passages to answer. They call it external or extraterrestrial passage. I don't know why they bring such a passage to students and they expect them to answer that. Additionally, the whole model of education was based on animals. And I don't know if you know this or not, but back in the 1960s and 1970s, there were so many experimentation in psychology on animals, especially dogs. So dogs were trained to be given lunch at certain time repeatedly, and doing this repetition made dogs salivate
the stimulus
a few minutes before they are given the lunch or the meal, any kind of meal,
like a kind
so
of
they
reward.
started so they said, psychologically speaking, if animals are repeatedly trained to be given this meal and they start salivate, there's some cognitive response in their mental and nervous system to the external stimuli, which is food. Let's try that on human. And then they came to classroom and they said, repeat after me. Good morning, teacher. And they kept saying that as if the experiment on dogs were applicable to human beings. And that is very famous experiment that was conducted in the 60s and 70s on variety of animals. And they transferred that to the human education system, which is quite funny. So the idea is that the whole applicability of this education model is not valid anymore, and there should be some transformation in the way of that. And to take that in consideration, teachers should be trained, not only students.
Of course.
I totally agree with this one. Because now the materials that they have are really updated and they are really good. But the fault is with the method of teaching the students, as Mr. Waleed mentioned.
Yeah, that's right. And I know, personally, some teachers, mathematics teachers, and they teach English because the school doesn't have an English teacher.
Well, Amar, I think there is abundance of sources, but lack of quality.
I mean the quality, believe me. There are, if you go to native teachers, for example, and resources, they are so much great if you compare them to us. But the idea is how. How. And when you're asked by someone, how to improve my English, there is no one way. Because we are all different in our age, in our interests, in our educational background, in our time management. Everything is different.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just say like this and that, watch movies, listen to music, and read novels, and that's it. No, this is not the only way.
You know, there's another interesting thing that I've noticed back when I was studying in the United States. There's this concept of institutionalization of the education facilities. You're giving enough autonomy to take care of your income, you take care of the matriculated students, you take care of your cohorts, you build your education model of teaching following certain standards, not breaching these standards. These are federal standards, but following the whole system and hooking this system to the federal government system. What happens, this autonomy of education will give the university enough flexibility to choose selectively the good, accomplished professors and teachers to teach their students. And if somebody errs, ERRS, if somebody errs, they will definitely give him the sack, and then they will replace him with another teacher. The whole education system here is tied as a captive to certain ministries. And if the ministry decides just suddenly that there is sudden shift in the education system, the whole serial reaction is going to be followed in every single school in the country, and every single school in the country will receive this turbulence of bureaucratic procedures. And then that is going to be on the expense of training students effectively and efficiently.
Of course. But we've been talking about children and teenagers. What about college students? We've been all college students, right? And we've seen it. I think, Walid, you've been in College of Languages before me. I was there too.
Correct.
And Osama, I think University of Iraqi?
Al-Iraqi University, College of Arts.
Good. And you've seen what we've been taught, okay? And when most, and I believe in this, most students graduate, they still, English graduates, they still can't use the language. How is that? Isn't this, something to be ashamed of?
This is really kind of, let's say, complex, because sometimes you find weak instructors, and some let's say, students use it as an excuse not to study hard or even to try to practice English.
Why?
Why? Like a lot of them feel shy. Like, I don't want to make mistakes or something, or I have no one to talk to. Although they are all studying English and they all can engage and practice English together.
Yes.
But they just don't take this approach and do it. So,
and they know, in the end, that they're all going to graduate. This is the main point I believe in.
Exactly.
And they do. Whether in
they
private
do graduate.
Or government or college.
Yes, and a lot of them sometimes get jobs and even start, let's say, teaching English.
Yes.
Although they are having really weaknesses in English. But again, I believe that they don't really try to start and develop themselves, and they keep blaming the whole system.
Yes.
So I personally, for example, the reason I say this, because I used to use the materials I had back then and read and study out loud as if I'm practicing with someone. So I found a way to overcome the difficulties or the weaknesses of the...
Or with your colleagues?
I used to do both. So when I study alone, I study out loud, as if I'm talking to my books. And I used to speak English with my colleagues and even with the instructors to practice what I'm learning.
Yeah.
A lot of them just don't do it.
Yeah. Because as I remember in our department, we didn't. among colleagues, we didn't speak the language. We just spoke it in the classroom and for a few minutes, and then some teachers or professors switched to Arabic. This was the problem.
I remember once. By the way, you all know that the really critical moment is when you are speaking English to someone and that person answers in Arabic.
No,
you would be in a really really bad situation here. Whether shall I shift to Arabic or shall I just continue? So one day we left the class with one of the instructors back then, and I was asking him in English, and he said, Osama, please don't speak Arabic with me because I respect my Arabic language. I told him, and I remember I really got the guts, and I told him in English. I replied in English saying, "Sir, but I want to practice English," and it was hard actually, but I did it.
Embarrassing, maybe.
And couple years later, he called me, wanted me to work with him. So
I think, thankfully, for a bigger community of English teachers who have started documenting their work recently and spreading the word about the significance of English and the importance of this language, particularly in the world nowadays. Globally speaking, there's a huge population of people who started catching up and learning, and for the generation of 80s and 90s, they started catching up with that level of the accelerating level, actually, of language learning. I remember when we had a delegation back in 2016 to Indiana State University, and then there's a group of students who were able to connect a bicycle to electricity generator, and this electricity generator was connected to a DJ player. Okay. So the DJ player, has to ask one volunteer to ride a bicycle and start pedaling. Yep. And once he starts pedaling, the longer he pedals, the longer the music of the DJ will continue. Okay. And that triggered an idea in myself that what kind of experience we've gone through when we were at university to make us be a small community that develops collaboratively a project or build a model for learning. So we create small safe houses, we say, technically speaking, of speakers of English. To compare it and contrast it with another experience, I went to one of the colleges asking for Sons and Lovers novel and movie. And, to some extent, this is relatively taboo kind of novel to read. They refused to give me the CD to watch the movie. And at that time, 2006, we didn't have access to enough multimedia to learn and enrich our ears, to see and listen to kind of good quality, authentic sources of language learning, whatever. I used to tape record on old audio cassettes that were used to be given to family members that had some Holy Quran on. So I had to wipe the Holy Quran and then record some of the I'm serious. I had to turn the TV to an English channel and then record that on the English channel on the audio cassette and start listening to it. And it's just pressing that kind of button was a pain in the neck at that time. The idea, to put it simply, is that there is no experiential knowledge and there is no experiential engagement among students. Students get exhausted of traffic, which is something irrelevant to their college environment of learning. There are other external factors there. For example, family income, of course, their family commitments, the academic pressure on them. The whole education system is built on producing, milking students to get grades, so that grades get reported to the administration. So milking students for grades over the expense of the quality of learning or having them learn something better is just nonsensical. One time, our professors back in the United States, one of the professors, Peter Shaw, took us to a field of tomato, and he made us plant some tomato, just to draw an analogy of how language learning and teaching is like planting a seed in the land, and then watering that correctly and seasonally to the point of getting the fruit, ultimately speaking.
Yeah.
So the idea is that there is no creative fusion of theory and application. Plus, the whole selection of materials reminds me of having paracetamol in a pharmacy kiosk and prescribing this paracetamol to those people who are getting chemotherapy, and those people who have stomach ache, and those people who have toothache, and those people who have migraine.
Yeah.
It's the same syllabi that is given and prescribed for everyone, just because we are milking them for grades, because we are under instructions from the ministry to report grades in timely manner.
What about Waleed, for some doctors and people who are, let's say, professional in English? They say that we have moved to communicative approach. Do you believe in this?
That's ludicrous. That's theoretically possible, but practically impossible to some extent. When you see people actually promulgate for this sort of statements, you go to the classroom and you see that the whole classroom is designed in a very obsolete way, to the extent that you cannot just let one student move out of the desk without bumping into one of the nails in the desk and hurting herself, or tearing out her skirt, or shredding his pair of shoes. It's almost impossible to apply something. You cannot convince a square to be a circle without just having them looking at themselves and perceiving the idea that this model is completely different from that model, and it requires some artistic and engineering framing to make it the new model. I mean, every operating system that we see nowadays is building on an old model, but trying to bridge any kind of gap in the old model and improving it and building on it, listening to people. That's what ultimately succeeds. Listening to clients and customers and the global demand to more spoken and written skills than, not to underestimate listening and reading, but the whole generation now is on demand to be able to be speaking better and be more communicative.
Yeah. I've seen that Osama uses, I think, American accent. Am I right?
Yeah. I do.
And I've seen some people yes, commenting on this, sometimes praising you, other times blaming you.
Yeah,
how do you take this?
I've got this comment on TikTok, and I replied to it in a video saying, you're using American accent, and we learn British in Iraq. Like, dude, it's only a matter of accent, and the variations between the two accents. I mean, in terms of grammar, it's just the same. Only some just little differences in some words,
vocabulary.
And you'll find these differences if you go to different states or different, let's say, also states in the UK. That's so normal. Some people still have this old mentality that we're learning a British curriculum, and
it's not. It's going to be
like
right.
I always tell them, like, it's like, first, if you are a really beginner, your purpose is to deliver an idea.
Yeah.
Even if this idea has mistakes, just take them easy. So this is why I'm learning now, or training myself how to speak British.
Why? We all have accents.
It's quite funny. Yeah. It's quite funny that American people think British accent sounds more elegant, and it refers to higher intellectual ability.
Yeah.
And I had a British roommate who used to think that American accents indicates delicacy and friendliness and being approachable.
Yeah.
So it's all of the perception of the world, but people are still in that box. They don't think out of the box of what
I
the
think
world.
only here, I think.
To some, well, 90% probably, if I'm not mistaken. Statistically speaking, I don't have evidence for that, but the majority of people that I've come across who blame people for not speaking a British accent are people who live in Iraq, and they've been locked mentally with a password that is irrevocable.
Yeah.
The idea of everybody speaks with an accent, and accents
By
is
the
like
way,
asking
we don't have
Osama.
100% American accent.
No,
we're not native.
No, nobody, not me, not anybody, not anybody. It's like asking someone, why are you wearing a blue shirt?
Yeah,
it's
I like
wrong. It's haram. Wear
Yes.
a blue shirt. You should wear a red shirt or black shirt because that is what is standard. And to what extent do you prove that is a standard? Now we have criteria. What criteria? The number of speakers. Now let's talk about it. That statistically, in United Kingdom, there is 63 million people. In the United States, there are 400 million people. In Canada, which speaks in it's adjacent to US, they have more speakers of American accent than those people who speak in British accent in UK. Now, to what extent and to what criteria do you think you can prove that RP is more common? And what's the standard of commonality? Is it the number of people who speak it? Okay. If that is the case, what gender, males or female? What age, older age or younger age? If we're talking about older age, they are coming from different kind of background. They've been in wars. They've had different kind of expressions. They don't know what the word selfie and vlog mean. So how do you prove, sociolinguistically speaking, that the British accent is valid or more valid than American accent? That's just the whole debate.
Even if you
debate.
prove it, what's the point?
What's the point? The whole
to show that you are from a higher class and better than me.
I don't care if you're from Somalia or from Congo Brazzaville. What I care is that you understand. What I care is that you understand that I'm ordering a hamburger with a Diet Coke. I don't care what accent you say that in. I just need to understand that. That's what you mean.
Yeah. And you've seen the series of Mind Your Language, I think?
Yeah,
the British
of course.
one. This is a very good example. They have different nationalities. They have Ali Nadeem, I think from India or Pakistan. Okay. Yeah. But they understand each other later on.
Yeah, but, the old series.
I'm probably a proponent of the idea of being tolerant to a variety of accents and training your ears to a variety of accents. We have Australian, Irish, Wales. We have American, Canadian, and in the United States, I've been. I lived for almost a year and a half with a host family that the dad did not speak the same as the mother, and they did not speak the same as their children.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you have to be tolerant to train your ear to a variety of accents and dialects. And even in standard tests like IELTS and TOEFL, what they say is that we know that the IELTS, for example, is a British test, but we use a variety of dialects for sake of non-bias.
Of course.
And that is in of itself enough evidence of the insignificance of the idea of focusing on accent. No, nobody cares about accents. I had a Middle Eastern accent, and a friend of mine in US said, "You have a very sexy accent," because they like I'm serious. They like the Russian accent because it just shows some good personality. They like the Middle Eastern accent because it shows some ruggedness, and they like that kind of, manpower, the alpha man that has this kind of accent or dialect. Speak whatever kind of, as long as you're not offensive, as long as you are comprehensible and understood by people. There is no way that accent can interfere with that accent. But just for some comedy purposes, probably they just make fun of certain accents.
Yeah. That
Yeah,
is
when
true.
it comes to foreign ministers, if you watch them on CNN, BBC, they
Mhm.
speak very good English, but when you hear them, they retain their own, let's say, Iraqi accent, Persian accent,
Yeah.
whatever accent is there. But their
Mm.
English is very good. And when it comes to practice, comes the grammar. Osama, I think
Yeah,
you've been
well,
asked, yeah, that I want
yeah.
to learn English without a grammar. I want to speak.
Well, to be honest,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, I can see these days a lot of people saying that a grammar isn't important, but to be honest, it is so essential because it's the construction of English.
Mhm.
But those who are only aiming to learn English to speak, so they don't want it. Let's say they don't want to dive into the details.
Yeah.
Then I personally tend into focusing on tenses, which I believe like they are the best when it comes to grammar. But
Nice.
I like a grammar,
Mhm.
and I'm with it. But I don't really focus on it when I'm let's say creating videos.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what about you? Do you teach grammar,
I
or
would say,
you
well,
put it?
I mean,
when
since
you
I'm coming
speak.
from applied linguistic research
Yeah.
background, I always believe in numbers, and I say numbers don't lie.
Mhm.
I look at the most common frequent vocabulary or common frequent tenses or common frequent idiomatic expressions, and I put that in that recipe. Language learning is like making a pastry recipe.
Yes.
Now, what's this analogy, and why is it different? Why is it similar to pastry recipe? I would say tasting the delicateness and sweetness of language is like cooking a pastry recipe.
Yeah.
You cannot build a house without cement.
Of course
Grammar
not.
is the cement
Yeah.
of that keeps everything cohesive
Yeah.
and coherent.
Exactly.
And without grammar,
Collapses.
the whole building is going to collapse.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole structure of
Yeah.
sentence is going
Mhm.
to collapse. Now, why is this analogy to a recipe? Well, the combination of making a recipe requires a mechanical skill of the chef to be able to master that kind of recipe, and that mechanical is the training. And there's also the components, the main components of flour, sugar, water, and every one of these components has certain amount that should be added.
Yeah.
If you excessively add more salt, it's going to be salty. If you add less sugar, it's going to be bland. So you have to carefully orchestrate the components
Mhm.
to give you that kind of aroma
Mhm.
and that kind of delicate sweet texture.
Yeah.
In addition to the flavors, and the flavors of language are adjectives.
Yeah.
They are the sweet and butter,
Yeah.
delicate part of language.
Mhm.
So the idea of constructing a pastry recipe is just similar to the idea of constructing language and training language. The teacher should be like the chef, prepares the recipe, selecting enough components of grammar, focusing on the most important parts, sugary components, flour, and other elements, but do not excessively be focusing on grammar and just bombarding students with chemical formula like subject plus V plus pass of whatever. Crazy components that just make people think that they are watching Breaking Bad TV show.
Taking the idea of the chef, you see that the chef is missing in school then? Or college, even college?
Of course, to some extent, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
so the ingredients are there.
We don't have statistical study to prove that, but based on my observation,
the results,
that's definitely the case.
Yeah. The results are telling you this, right?
Definitely.
Right. Now, I will give you the space to say whatever difficulties you faced while teaching, whether with children, adults, teenagers. I don't know what you have. I don't know what circumstances you've been through. But let's start with Osama. What difficulties do you usually face when you teach English? Briefly, please. Yes.
Briefly. Well, I can tell that. So you mean the difficulty for me in teaching, or
no? I mean the difficulties that you face when you teach. I mean,
yeah. The most difficulty I face is probably when students are not memorizing sentences and vocabulary, because a lot of them think it's only a matter of understanding, and I believe it's not, because we have to memorize sentences, vocabulary, so that we can build different sentences and different conversations. So a lot of them think this is not the case. And also imitation. Like, I ask a lot of them to imitate what they listen to, if they want to get the accent. And some of them want to get the accent, but they just don't imitate what they are listening to. That's probably the only part that maybe I find some difficulties with.
Great.
Yeah.
Nice. And you, Waleed, what do you see?
Amar, I think the idea of every grammatical difficulty or communicative difficulty that the students had is not compared to the psychological difficulties that they've gone through. Whatever kind of linguistic element that they struggle with, we can have some certain remedial procedures to diagnose that and offer the sufficient assessment and treatment to that based on consecutive and sustainable training and exposure, or immersing students in certain kind of context that partially produce that and gradually scaling that up to the full functionality of that structure, grammatical structure or contextual structures that they use. However, most of the complications that I personally struggle with learners are psychological ones, coming from the idea that I am now going to learn English, and I'm just getting here to this level of
stuck here,
frustration and lack of ability to learn that language. I'm cognitively unable. I'm feeling disabled when it comes to learning.
They say that to you?
Of course. That's what I sense, actually, that they say I don't have the skills. I am feeling that I'm not going to be able to speak English.
Why are they coming to you then?
They're coming to me because they think that I have a magic spell to remedy that. And it's not about a magical skill. It's about calculations. You have to weigh what kind of psychological background they're coming from. And most of them, they have cluster psychological problems. They've been bullied. And by the way, I have this term, linguistic bullying. People are bullied just because they are heard speaking English. They say, look at that person, he speaks English. We are bullied sometimes. Blah, blah, blah. So there's this kind of stigma of speaking English in the Iraqi community. We are being stigmatized every single day just because people think that we are boastful when we speak English. We are proud to speak English. And that's not the case. We're just telling people that there is another dimension. It's just like learning another language is like seeing another color that you have not seen before.
Of course.
Speaking another language is like seeing world in colors. And before you're blind, colorblind. I really think that people who speak one language are colorblind, and they don't see how beautiful the world is and how cultures, whether Persian or Australian or Canadian culture or Indian culture, are beautiful. They are really beautiful and rich civilizations, and you wouldn't know that until you speak that language.
My difficulty may be similar to yours, which is impatience. I mean, most of them want to speak English in 1 month, and sometimes tell me, I'm not sure I'm going to speak English. Am I progressing? Do you see any kind of improvement? So it's like really frustrating. But just like you said, we have to tolerate this and move on. And we teach them. Even just like you said, the psychology.
We have to tolerate it. We have to tolerate it because we are getting paid to tolerate that kind of.
Of course, yes. But no, not only that. Of course, payment is, of course, there. But it's a kind of experience. Not
of course,
every student is the same.
And there's one more point, that a lot of them think that they will leave the course speaking English fluently.
Yeah.
This is why I tell them
Fluency.
because I like dealing with A2 and above. So I tell them this is a practicing course.
Yeah.
It will help you and show you the right way of practicing and learning. And you have to continue this way after leaving the course. You shall not stop, because if you stop, then you're only wasting your money, and that's all.
That's right.
Yeah.
So one last.
You cannot. I mean,
yes,
let me just say one thing more, that money cannot buy you language, no matter how much you try, and no matter how much you pay.
Unless
what we provide trainees is with opportunity to access the right materials and facilitate their process of sustainable training, exercising some pressure on them to be sustainable and study in their course and journey of training, and not withdrawing from that training at a certain point. Most of students get frustrated after 2 months, but believe it or not, if you reach month 8 of language learning, you would have accomplished more than 75% of your learning journey. And what is left is only a matter of little attempts to be professional English speaker.
Of course. One last question. Fluency.
Go ahead.
All students want fluency. Is it possible in our country? What do you think, Osama?
Fluency, of course it is possible, as long as they practice almost on a daily basis. And I say that a lot. If you have no one to practice with, then you can read out loud and talk to yourself. And of course, once you start really practicing seriously and wanting to find someone to talk with, you will find friends who want to practice as well, and then you guys can practice together. And it's so possible, as long as we manage to get to a fluent level, then everybody else can even get that level as well, and even can become better.
Nice. And Walid? Fluency.
Amar, I think we have to define what fluency is, and fluency is to be able to sustainably produce
quick
flow of language or linguistic structures in certain contexts, no matter what the topic is. Now, statistically speaking, the number of native speakers who are considered fluent in English, well, they are fluent in English, but on average, they speak 150 words per minute. So whatever, if the speaker is able to produce on a range or a scale between 120 words to 150 words or above, that is relatively considered fluent English speaker. Now, in bilingual education, anybody who speaks one single word from another language is considered bilingual person. If you want to accomplish fluency in English, I would say you need to be able to educate yourself in so many fields, because you can be comprehensible and you can be fluent when you talk about thermodynamics, but when it comes to talking about the technology advances in an iPhone, you might not be able to produce the same quality of fluency because of the lack of technical expressions within that territory.
That's right.
I mean, we just need to have a different set of vocabulary to describe how to make the pastry recipe,
of course,
and different set of vocabulary to describe the lesson planning and the procedure of measuring the biological metabolism of frogs. All of that kind of all of this spectrum of themes require different kind of reading and different kind of cognition, a higher level of reading. So you just need not to think of fluency, but to think of reading more, enriching your skills with reading variety of sources. That is going to be able to equip you with sufficient and valid vocabulary in this context or that context. Otherwise, fluency is just like the other Iraqi speaker who I see speaks nonsensical linguistic structures, and people think he speaks in American accent or he speaks English. That is fluency, technically speaking. Or when we say any kind of nonsensical structure of expressions. But once we leave this comfort zone, our major theme or topic. And even me or you or anybody who speaks in about, for example, politics, we might be able to talk about politics, but when it comes to talking about Aristotle and Plato concept of democracy, I mean, would we be able to use the same expressions and apply them in that field? No. So our fluency is going to drop down less than 120 words per minute. Now, what do we need then? We need vocabulary fuel to make us maintain the level of 100 words to 150 words per minute. So I would say, please don't pay attention to fluency. Do not super emphasize it. Focus more on delivering as much language as possible about a variety of topics. Learn more vocabulary, read more, enrich yourself with experiential knowledge. Travel if you are able and have access to that. Watch YouTube videos. This last week, I've watched 14 hours of YouTube lessons about video editing. So I'm just learning new vocabulary, and when it comes to talk about video editing,
even with video editing,
I feel like I'm an ignorant. Because I don't have the technical words to describe that. And I'm sorry, I have talked a lot.
No, wonderful.
I just wanted to clarify that point.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I can't thank you enough for being here with me.
You're more than welcome.
And I hope this won't be our last.
Well, thanks to you, and I would like to thank Mr. Walid, because I like listening to you, by the way.
Thank you so much, Islam. Thank you so much, Amar, for hosting this lovely meeting.
Welcome. Thank you for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Same to you. Thanks for having us.